In 40 years, Bangladesh have gone from 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. It's a miracle that has happened in Bangladesh. But is it only in Bangladesh? Well, I'll show you the whole world. I will go back 50 years in time to 1963. Here are all the countries. And these green ones is America, North and South. The yellow ones is Europe, East and West. And blue is Africa, North and South of the Sahara. And red is Asia, and we include Australia and New Zealand. The size of the bubble show the size of the population. Look, the big ones over there is China and India, and Bangladesh is just behind. In 1963, the average number of babies born per woman in the world was 5. But it was a divided world. Can you see that? These countries over here, the developed countries, they had small families and long lives. And then there were the developing countries over here, and they had large families and short lives, and very few were in between. But now we'll see what has happened. I start the world. Here we go. And you can see that China is getting, the big bubble is getting to better health, and then they start family planning, they move along to smaller families, and the big green, look at Mexico. Mexico is coming there, and this is Brazil, also the green in Latin America, and here India is following. India is following. The big red bubbles are Asian countries going this way. Many Africans are still with many babies born per woman, and then Bangladesh over there overtakes India on its way to the small family, and now almost all go up to this bubble. Even Africa now starts to move. Ooh, that was the earthquake in Haiti. And now everyone ends up there. What a change we have. Today, you know, in the world, the average is 2.5. Imagine, you know, it used to be 50 years ago 5. And the world has changed. The average number of babies born per woman have gone from 5 to 2.5. And it's still decreasing. What a big change. Child survival drives everything. Let's go back into history. Why did the world population grow so slowly before 1800? Well, throughout history, all historical records show us that on average, 2 parents got more or less 6 children. But that looks as a very fast population growth. So why didn't it grow? Because 1, 2, 3, 4 of the children died before growing up to become parents themselves. People in the past never lived in ecological balance with nature. They died in ecological balance with nature. It was utterly tragic. But with the Industrial Revolution, this changed. Better wages, more food, tapped water, better sanitation, soap, medical advances, you know. So why did then, from all these advances, why did population grow? Was it because they got more children? No. 1963, that year when I was at school, actually the number of children per woman had decreased a little in the world to 5. And the reason for the fast population growth was the improved child survival. 4 survived at that time. But still, 1 out of 5 died. That was still terrible. So it's only in the recent decades that most of the countries have taken big leap forwards in child survival and in family planning, so that we are now approaching the new balance. And it's a nice balance. 2 parents on average get 2 children that survive. We have families in a very happy balance. This is the most normal family situation in the world today. And what does this mean for the future here? I will show you the projection, the best projection into the future from the finest demographers we have at the Population Division of the United Nations. And it looks like this. It's going to continue first up to 8, and then it goes up to 9, and then it goes here. But see, it's slowing down. By the end of the century, it's becoming more flat there. And if I do a close-up on this, you can see that we are expecting a slowing down and the end of fast population growth. But of course, this is a projection that has a certain degree of uncertainty. But we are sure that we are at the end of fast population growth within this century. It's all due to a remarkable effect of the falling fertility rate. Look here, if we go back into this, I'll show this by showing you the number of children in the world. The number of children from 0 to 15 years of age. Here they come. Look, the number of children there increased slowly, and then also it increased rapidly. So by the turn of the century here, there were 2 billion children in the world. And to me, that was an important year because that was when Doris was born. That's my first grandchild. And she was born at a very special time for children in the world, you know, because the specialists, the demographers, estimate that from this year, the number of children in the world will continue like this. It will not increase any longer. By the end of the century, we will still have 2 billion children in the world. When Doris was born is when the world entered into the age of peak child. The number of children are not increasing. Now, this will confuse you because how can then the total population grow like this if the children doesn't increase? Where will all these adults come from? And to explain that, I have to leave this fancy digital stuff and show you real powerful educational material we have developed. And it's here. I will show you the world population, ladies and gentlemen, in the form of foam blocks. 1 block is 1 billion. 1 block is 1 billion. And that means that we have 2 billion children in the world. Then we have 2 billion between 15 and 30 years of age. These are rounded numbers. We have 1 billion 30 to 45. We have 1 billion 45 to 60. And then we have my block, 60 years and older. We are here on top. This is the world population today. And you can see that there are 3 billions missing, like here. Only few of them are missing because they have died. Most of them are missing because they were never born. Because back then, you know, before 1980, there were much fewer children born in the world because there were fewer women giving birth to children. So this is what we have today. Now, what will happen in the future? Do you know what happens to old people like me? They die. Yes. There was someone here who works in hospitals. Yeah? So they die. The rest, they grow 15 years older and have 2 billion children. These ones are now old, time to die. And then these ones grow 15 years older and they have 2 billion children. This one die and the rest grow 15 years older and have 2 billion children. And without increasing the number of children, without increasing the length of life, we have 3 billion people more by this big inevitable fill-up of adults, which will happen just when the large young generations grow up. Now, there's one more detail, which is good news for the older ones here, like me, that it's estimated that the old people will live a little longer. So we have to add 1 billion more for the old here on the top. And I'm desperately hoping that I will be part of that group, because then I can live long and read the annual statistic as they come reporting every year. You know. But when I talk to many fine environmental activists, which are really have a good concern about the environment, they very often tell me, we have to stop population growth at 8 billion. But when I then talk with them, first they don't know that we have reached peak child. And then they are completely unaware that most of the remaining population growth is an inevitable fill-up of adults. So we will end up with more or less this amount of people. So we know how many billions there will be, but what about where they live? Now and in the future. There you have the world, and here are the 7 billion. Now, out of the 7 billion, 1 live in the America, North and South together. 1 in Europe, 1 in Africa, and 4 in Asia. So this is now, but how to remember this? I have a very simple way of remembering this. I put up the numbers like this, and then I say, this is the PIN code of the world, 1114. Now, what will happen up to mid-century? That we know fairly well. Europe, no increase. In fact, the European population is decreasing. In America, a little more people, mainly retired people in Latin America, so it makes no difference. It's more or less the same. In Asia, we will have 1 billion more. And then the population growth in Asia is over. In Africa, in the next 40 years, the population will double to 2 billion. Now, to the end of the century, well, we know quite well, no more people in Europe, no more in America, no more in Asia, but Africa is set as we have data today for another doubling. So there will be 4 billions in Africa. The 2100 and probably the final PIN code will be 1145. So in 2100, there will be quite a different world. The people who live in what I call the Old West, in West Europe and North America, will by then be less than 10% of the world population. 80% of the world population will be living in Asia and Africa. But will there be resources enough to sustain them? Well, this will be a huge challenge, and nothing will come automatically. But my take is that it is possible for all these billions to live well together. During 200 years, in less than 1 minute, I have an axis for income. I have an axis for lifespan. I start in 1800, and there are all the countries. And back in 1800, everyone was down in the poor and sick corner. Can you see? Low lifespan, little money. And here comes the effect of the Industrial Revolution. Of course, the countries in West Europe, they are coming to better wealth, but they are not getting much healthier in the beginning. And those under colonial domination doesn't benefit anything in there. They remain there in the sick and poor corner. And now health is improving, health is slowly improving here. It's getting up here, and we are coming into the new century, and the terrible First World War, and then the economic recession after that, and then the Second World War. And now independence, and with independence health is improving faster than it ever did in other countries here, and now starts the fast economic catch-up of China and other Latin American countries. They come on here, you know, and India is following there, and the African countries is also following. It's an amazing change that has happened in the world. You know, in the front here we have now US and UK, but they're not moving so fast any longer. The fast movers are here in the middle. China is moving very fast to catch up. And Bangladesh, look, Bangladesh is already here, now quite healthy, and now starting with fast economic growth. And Mozambique, yes, Mozambique is back there, but they are now moving fast in the right direction. But all this I show you is country averages. What about people? Have people also got a better life? I'm now going to show you something which makes me very excited as a statistician. I'm going to show you income distribution, the difference between people. And to do that, I take the bubbles back 50 years, and then we are going to look only at money. And to do that, we have to expand and adjust the axis, because the richest is so rich and the poorest is so poor. So this will be a bigger difference than between the countries. And what we do now is that we let the country fall down here, this is United States, and spread to show the range within the country. And I take down all the countries in the Americas. And now you can see from the richest person to the poorest person. And the height here shows you how many there are on each income level. And now let's take down Europe. And on top of that, I'm going to put Africa. And finally, the region with most people, on top of everything, Asia. Now, in 1963, the world was constituted by two humps. First, the richest hump. It's like a camel, isn't it? The first hump here with the richest is mainly Europe and the Americas. And the poorest hump over here is mainly Asia and Africa. And the poverty line was there. Can you see how many people there were in extreme poverty 50 years ago? And most of them were in Asia. And people were saying Asia will never get out of poverty. Exactly as some people are still saying about Africa today. Now, what has happened? I start the world. And you can see that many people are born into poverty here, but Asia goes towards higher income, and 1 billion goes out of extreme poverty this way, and the whole shape of the world changed, and the camel is dead. It's reborn as a dromedary. And what you can see here, is the variation from the richest, that is most people in the middle. And there's a much smaller proportion of the world now in extreme poverty. But be careful, it's still a lot of people, more than 1 billion people in extreme poverty. Now the question is, can this move out of extreme poverty now continue for those in Africa and even for the new billions in Africa?
I think it's possible, even probable, that most countries in Africa will rise out of poverty too. It will need wise action and huge investment, but it can happen. The many countries of Africa are not all advancing at the same pace. A few are moving very fast, others are stuck in conflict. But most, like Mozambique, are now making steady progress. And what about feeding all the new African people in the future? Yes, there are shortages today, but there is also much potential here. Agricultural yields in Africa are just a fraction of what they could be with better technology. And Africa's rivers are barely tapped for irrigation. One day, Africa could hum with combine harvesters and tractors and grow food for many more billions. And please, don't imagine it's just me who thinks Africa can make it. The United Nations is about to set itself a new official goal, eliminating extreme poverty within 20 years. Everyone understands it's a huge challenge, but I seriously believe it's possible.
Imagine if that would happen. Now, what we have seen so far is that the rich end, it moves. And the middle, it moves. But this poorest end is stuck. It's here in extreme poverty we find almost all the illiteracy. Here we find high child mortality and still many babies born per woman. It's like extreme poverty reproduces itself if you don't end it swiftly. But Andre and Olivia and people like them, they work so hard to get away from it. And if they only can get the right help from their government and from the world at large, with things like school, health, vaccines, roads, electricity, contraceptives, then they will manage. But they will mainly manage by their own hard work. Here we go, go on, follow Andre and Olivia across the line, It is possible within some decades, yes! But getting out of poverty is just the beginning. People want to continue along this line to a good life. But what does a good life mean?
For most people in the world, the good life they are striving for will mean more machines and much more use of energy. So there's a problem, because all this adds to one of the great threats for the future, severe climate change. 80% of the energy the world uses is still fossil fuels. And the science shows that the climate may change dramatically in the future because of the carbon dioxide emission from continuing to burn all these fossil fuels.
I'm not the best person to tell you how bad climate change will be, nor am I a specialist on how to prevent it. What I can do is to show you data to make you understand who is the one that emits the carbon dioxide. I will show this. You remember the yardstick from the poorest billion to the richest billion, from the one who hardly can afford shoes to the one who fly with airplanes. Now, this shows the total amount of fossil fuel used in the world during 1 year. Coal, oil, and natural gas. And it represents more or less the total emission of carbon dioxide. Now, how much of that is used by the richest billion? Half of it. Now, the second richest billion? Half of what's left. Then you understand what the third use. Half of what's left. And the others use hardly anything. This is rounded numbers, but it clearly shows, you know, that almost all the fossil fuel is used here by the 1, 2, 3 richest billions. More than 85% they use. Now, the richest billion here at least have stopped increasing, but we are yet to see whether they will decrease. And in the coming decades, it's the economic growth of these two that will increase the fossil fuel use and the carbon dioxide emission. Even if these ones over here come out of extreme poverty and get richer all the way to the motorbike, that doesn't contribute much to the emission of carbon dioxide. And regarding population growth, most of the additional billions in the next 40 years will be in this group here. But still, if you ask people in the richest end, they seem to get everything wrong. They look down on the world from their very high emission, and then they say, oh, those over there, you cannot live like us. You will destroy the planet. You see, I find the argument from the people here catching up to be much more correct than logic. They say, who are you to tell us that we can't live like you? You better change first if you want us to do it differently.
There are many essentials to having a good life that billions in the world do not yet have. Andre's village and house, and so many like them, don't even have electricity. Mozambique has huge coal reserves. And if it and the other poorest countries build affordable new power stations burning coal for electricity and industry, I don't think anyone who emits more carbon should interfere.
Now, what I'm going to do is ask you 2 questions that I often ask my Swedish students.